my biggest thing I tell people all the time is like taking action is the better than education any day of the week, right? It's the best form of education in my opinion. So I do that a lot where like I'll jump headfirst into something if I want to go after it. And that was the case with this one. I was like, okay, we have some money, let's go find a place and let's do it. And we did it, and we made a ton of mistakes, and it still ended up being like probably the best decision, that one property that like I ever made, right? So, and every subsequent purchase, I could probably tell a very similar story. But that's all it was finding people that had the resources that I lacked, right? I didn't have $100,000 at the time. I had a decent W-2 job, and so did my partners. But we all had a little bit of money, and we pulled it together to make something happen. So that's how it all started.
For someone looking to do the same thing, what are some gotchas on the partnership, like structuring that, making sure all sides are protected?
Yeah, if you're going to do a normal LLC setup, obviously you want an operating agreement, right? That's going to govern how you do business, who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and it's a good document to always fall back on, right? And it's not only going to outline your percentage ownership and all that good stuff, but you could put specifics in there, on key responsibilities. And if somebody's not holding up their end of the bargain, it's a good way to renegotiate the deal. I think what's some of the gotchas that I faced over the years were like, I'd say the number one thing was alignment of goals between partners, right? If I think that's one of the most critical things to talk about when you first get started, is how do we come to an agreement on where we want to be in 2, 3, 10 years from now? And who knows? A lot of people don't know where they're going to be in 10 years or where they want to be in 10 years at this point. But I think my first couple partners and I had some disagreements around how we wanted to grow this thing, right? And so was it going to just be one property? Was it going to be 10 properties? Did we want to scale outside of El Paso or Chicago, wherever we're going to look at? And so I think nailing down who's going to do what and then what your goals are as a group, probably the two most critical things in my opinion. And obviously, having an attorney look over everything and make sure you're doing the right stuff. But that would be the first piece of advice that I'd give for people looking to partner with others.
Yep. And when you first got started, did you sell yourself short? I know I've heard that from other people. They underestimate if they're the guy on the ground, like how much time it's going to take. And oh crap, like I should have, I'm worth more than this.
The first probably 8 deals I did, like I didn't, I totally underestimated how much time and effort I was going to be putting into. And at the time I was putting in equal dollar amounts per my percentage ownership as everybody else was, but I was doing all the work. And it took me probably 5 years before I put my foot down and said, hey, look, if I'm going to be running the project, I need at least a little bit more equity in exchange for that effort. But I think a lot of people suffer from that too, right? It's like there's naturally someone or two people that might take the lead on some things, and eventually all things start gravitating towards or orbiting around those two people, and everyone kind of just sort of heads to the sidelines, the other folks that aren't as involved. And so I would say like if that starts happening to folks, like you got to nip it in the bud real quick, because I all of a sudden 5 years in I was like running all these different deals and not getting paid for it, and it was a really eye-opening thing once I realized how much time I was actually putting into these.
Yep. All right. So you've mentioned Jacksonville, you mentioned El Paso. What's the first property in Chicago you bought?
Aside from my primary residence, I partnered with two of my best friends now, who we own BCG Real Estate Group with, 𝗬𝗓𝗏, who you had on the show before, and 𝗬𝗓𝗏𝗵𝗁.
Yeah, Joey, episode 245 to interject. Great episode on short-term rentals.
Yep. JD's the short-term rental wizard of our group. JD's a Navy guy, Joey's an Air Force guy, so it's kind of like an unlikely pairing of our partnership. But we got together and we said, hey, look, like they were doing some cool stuff on the short-term rental side. It was still a little new to me, but we had a thesis of let's buy a 4 flat, turn one of the units into a Airbnb and juice our rents that way. And so we started overanalyzing everything and looking at properties, and we found a 4-unit in Wicker off market that needed a little work, but not a ton of work. And that was the first one we took down, and this would have been early 2018, so about 6 years ago now.
Okay, so you're in Wicker. We get a 4 unit, and the plan is, we have three long term. We're going to Airbnb one of them. What are some of those early mistakes?
So COVID was probably the first big problem as a lot of people faced. It's not really a mistake on our part, but um, that was the first major hurdle that we hit. At the time, Joey and JD were pretty experienced on the short-term rental side. We didn't fully understand probably how bad the seasonality was in Chicago when we first started, right? And so we were constantly trying to figure out how do we fill these winter months with some midterm, more stable renters, because December, January, February, you were getting literally zero Airbnb bookings. So that was the first thing we had to account for after we got that thing furnished. And then we put a few, I would say, midterm renters in there through the winter. Eventually we got some actually longer term stays with the furnished units. I think we also I don't want to say, probably underestimated how quickly we would have to refresh some of the furniture. The last group that we had, which made us go away from the furnished route, this was just post COVID, basically destroyed everything, not everything that we had in there, but pretty much made a lot of the furniture obsolete. So we ended up converting it back to a long-term rental once we realized COVID was going to be a challenging period. But so yeah, I would say looking back, seasonality was a huge thing in Chicago, right? A lot of other markets might not face it as bad. I have some short-term rentals in Nashville too. Sure, the winter gets a little bit